to be different, called to be changed. So God, make us different, make us change so we can shine in the darkest places, shine so they can see your face, shine and experience your amazing grace. So let us shine.
This morning, I'm going to start with a story for you guys about something that happened in my life. You may have already heard it once. You may have heard bits and pieces of it. So, for those of you who have heard it, I'm sorry you get to hear it again. Hooray for you. For those of you who haven't, yay, a new story for you. So, recently, Cameron and I bought a new car. Well, I actually don't know how recently it was. It was a few months ago. It's recent enough in my mind that it feels like it was just like 2 months ago, but it was probably closer to 6 or 7 months ago. We had 2 cars. And Angela had moved here. She had been using Cameron's red car most days, and Cameron was using our other car. And everything was going well, but we knew both the cars, they were old. They had a lot of miles on them. And so we had been slowly saving for a new car. Then, as Angela is in the search for her own car, I kept looking and helping her find some and just looking, browsing, seeing what's out there, seeing how much we would need to save for a vehicle and what type we would want. Suddenly, the red car just died. Angela was driving it to work one day and it died on 10. She was able to pull off. Luckily, it was right next to the mechanic we had been using at the time, and so they were able to come and get her, and they were like, yeah, this car's, you don't even want to try to fix it. Just get rid of it. So we got rid of it. So we suddenly only had one, but luckily, Angela had just found a car and had just gotten it. Well, she was just about to get it, and so she had gotten it like 2 days after the red car died or something silly like that, where she had spent months and months and months looking for a car, and right when it died is when she got one. Perfect timing, right? Then Cameron and I are like, well, our white car is getting really close to dying. It wasn't sounding quite right, but we were like pushing off that mechanic because we're like, as soon as we're going to take it in, all they're going to tell us is this car is too many things to fix and too old, you might as well just get a new one. And so we were pushing it off a little bit. So finally, we decided, well, let's go. We finally found a car we liked. We went and we test drove it, and we're like, yes, this is the car. Like, God has provided this car for us. This is going to be the car. We got that car. Not even a week later, our white car just stopped turning on. It just stopped. We had our neighbor mechanic came and look at it, and he was like, it could be this fix, so why don't you get it towed to the mechanic that's like by our house. If you've ever been there, it's like boop. It's like 2 minutes, so it was like the cheapest tow job you'll ever have. And they're like, yeah, this ain't fixing. You're like, yeah, that one thing was wrong, but also we tried to turn it on and it kind of sounded like kaboom. So you don't want to fix this car, just sell it for parts. So we did. And then now we have one very nice working car. Well, nice for us, working car. But it was insane. All of those different things fell into place just at the right time. Angela getting her car just as the one died. Us getting our new car just as the other one decided to leave as well. Even though that's not what the plan was. We thought we had a bit more time with both of the vehicles that we thought we actually were going to have. But that's not what happened. And that happens a lot in life. It happens a lot in Scripture where we think one thing is going to happen and it doesn't, or we think it's going to happen in a very specific way and it doesn't, because we honestly can't plan everything out to a T, which is very frustrating to some of us. It might be a little frustrating to all of us, but some of our personalities are, I need a plan, and if it doesn't go to plan, what am I going to do? But that's okay. So today we're actually going to talk in Judges 19 through 21, but for those of you who automatically know that and might be a little giggly about what that is, don't worry. We're going to make it PG. Don't worry. It's going to be okay. If you want to read it on your own, that'll be great. I highly suggest reading it as an adult and with discernment of when to allow your child to read it. I remember reading this passage as my dad spoke about it at probably like 10 or 11, and he just like said the whole thing. He was very much, everyone just gets to hear it. I'm not going to do that today for you parents, for your kids, don't worry. We'll skim through a couple of the parts. But in Judges 19, if you would like to turn there, we're going to primarily stick in Judges this morning, and so we're not going to move around all that much, which is very different for me. I usually move around a lot. I also am going to have a PowerPoint today. That's also very different for me, so we're going to hope that it goes well. So Judges 1 says, "Now it came about in those days when there was no king in Israel." So in Judges, it's a book of a time period where they had gotten finally to the promised land. They had settled, they had separated Israel into 12 tribes and had people all settle. We'll look at a map in a minute. And they didn't have a king because God's goal was for him to basically be their king. They'd be following the laws that Moses had written for them, and that they would do well, that they would prosper, that they would follow him. However, as we see from Judges, that's not really what happened. He kept having to send these judges to say, all right, let's get back on track. All right, let's fix where we're going. And eventually, God finally said, all right, here's a king. And they got a king. But in Judges 19, we aren't actually positive where Judges 19 falls on the timeline of when it happens. It either was just sometime in one of the other time periods of a judge, or it could have been right near the end. It's not 100% clear, but they didn't have a king. And that's a key thing to remember. They didn't have a king, and they were just these 12 tribes ruling themselves. There was a certain Levite staying in a remote part of the hill country of Ephraim, who took a concubine for himself from Bethlehem in Judah. But that concubine went home and stayed with her dad for a while. Can we have the map on the screen, Liam? So, circled in purple, you might not be able to see it. It's the very light. That's Ephraim. That's where this Levite is from. So that's where he is from, and then he travels down to the other circle. If you squint, you might be able to see it. It says Bethlehem. That is where his concubine is from. That is where her father lives, and so that is where he goes to go and see her. As you can see, it's in the tribe of Judah. Oh, I have it right here. I don't even have to turn around to look at it. So that is, he started in the purple, then he went down to that other circle. And he spent some time there. The father-in-law seemed to really enjoy his company. They had good food, they had good drinks. They enjoyed each other's company for quite a few days. And the father-in-law, if you have out-of-state relatives and you go and visit them, they likely will say, "Can you please stay one more day?" I know my family was definitely like that. Growing up, we would have a lot of out-of-town visitors, especially our friends from Canada, and we would say, "Are you sure you can't just stay one more day? Like, we're having so much fun. You can stay one more day, right?" And so that's what the father-in-law does. He says, "You can stay one more day, right?" So the Levite's like, "Okay, I'll stay one more day." And he does that a couple times, and eventually it comes in the late afternoon, and the Levite finally says, "I have to go home. Like, I like spending time with you, but I have to go home." It's like when we come to that point of vacation when we're all done and we're like, we're just ready for our own bed, and we have responsibilities. Like we might have a cat and we want to relieve our pet sitter, or a dog and we want to relieve our pet sitter, or we have plants, or we just want to be in our own bed. And so that's where this guy had been. He was like, all right, we're leaving. Normally, people would start their journey in the morning, especially so then they could get to where they wanted to go. And so they could stop at the locations they wanted to. However, he left in the late afternoon, evening, and so it was already becoming dark. And at the time, they didn't really have lights. They had their lamps, but there was no road lights. There was no electric lights. They weren't in a car. They were moving rather slowly. And so they didn't get very far. But the Levite man and his concubine got as far as they could. They came to a city called Gibeah in Benjamin. That's about approximately halfway between the 2 points. It's not quite sure where Gibeon was, but you can see nestled between the 2 circles is a light blue country called Benjamin. Well, tribe, they weren't countries. That is kind of where everything takes place, is in that little sliver of Benjamin. And so they came to this town and they stayed there. It took a lot of effort for them to find someone. They went to the town, center. There is usually a well there for your animals, and it was where everyone would go through to get to their houses. And so a visitor would go and stay there and hope that someone would let them into their home, because at the time there was no inns, there was no bed and breakfast. It was just hoping someone was kind enough to put you up. And a lot of the people of Gibeah passed this guy by. I was like, nope, that's not gonna be me. And finally, an old Ephraim man who lived in the city at the time came across them and decided to invite them into his home. He was like, yeah, I have water for you. I have food for your animals. I can house you guys for the night. Great, I'll take care of you. And that was the custom of the time. You usually were supposed to do that. It was expected that you did that for visitors. And so that kind of says something about the people of Gibeah. That's kind of your first warning of, maybe these people aren't very stand-up. Maybe these people aren't all that great. The second warning came when the men of the town surrounded the home that the Levite man was staying in. They demanded some things of the Levite man, where you can read about what their demand was if you would like. And so he sent his wife out to entertain the crowd for the night to leave him alone. That did not end well for his concubine. In the morning, the man rose to allow her to come back inside, and he found her dead on his doorstep. That must have been devastating for this man. So he sent a sign out to the 12 tribes of Israel saying what had been done and what had happened here. In Judges 19, verse 30, which will be on the screen, all who saw it said, "Nothing like this has ever happened or been seen from the day when the sons of Israel came up from the land of Egypt to this day. Consider it, take counsel, and speak up." This man must have been unbelievably angry. He saw this unrighteousness that happened, and he wanted the rest of the tribes to know, to say, hey, look at what this city did. What do we do about it? He wanted them to consider it and to take counsel and to speak up about it. What do those 3 steps look like? Considering it. That means taking time to think about it. Thinking about what had happened. Mulling it over, analyzing the situation, taking counsel, talking to other people about it to see what's the best route of action. And then finally saying, all right, here we go. We're going to do this. It wasn't, come in and come fight these guys. It was, let's have this slow process of finding what to do. This slow, calculated process of finding what to do. So, in verse 1 of 20, it says, "And all the sons of Israel from Dan to Beersheba, including the land of Gilead, came out, and the congregation assembled as one man to the Lord at Mizpah." They assembled as one man to the Lord at Mizpah. That means they came together and were of one mind. They came together to be one group, to be a united force. If you remember anything about the history of these tribes, It all started with the promise that Abraham was made of having many descendants and having a blessed nation. And then it got to Jacob, who was also known as Israel. And his descendants, his children, were the ones who basically were the heads of these tribes. I say that in quotes because they are long dead at this point. They had all of these descendants, and they came and settled in the different regions. They were pretty separate. They interacted slightly, but it's kind of like different states, where you kind of do your own thing, but you're going to travel between them. You're going to have relatives. You're going to marry from a different place. And that's kind of what it looked like. And so them coming and being united as one was pretty important for them. And pretty pivotal for us to remember that they didn't try to do it separately. Judah didn't try to respond in a different way than Simon or Simeon. They wanted to be united as one. Let's start reading again at verse 8 in chapter 20. Then all the people arose as one man. That same key phrase, one man. Saying, not one of us will go to his tent, nor will any of us return to his house. But now this is the thing which we will do to Gibeah. We will go up against it by lot. And we will take 10 men out of 100 through the tribes of Israel, 100 out of 1,000, 1,000 out of 10,000, to supply food for the people, that when they came to Gibeah of Benjamin, they may punish them for all the disgraceful acts that they have committed in Israel. Thus all the men of Israel were gathered against the city, united as one man. This is a question for Liam, a little aside. Do you want me to tell you every time you should click? Okay, you can click. I'll try to remember to tell you. So that verse, once again in verse 8 and 11, they were gathered and united as one man. They were united as one people. They were not making this decision separately. They were making it together. Now, their decision was to punish them because they saw that they had done a great evil. In verse 12 through 13, we see this. Then the tribes of Israel sent men through the entire tribe of Benjamin, saying, what is this wickedness that has taken place among you? Because Gibeah was a city in Benjamin, and so they were trying to get Benjamin kind of on board and saying, look at what they've done. What is going on here? Are you, the tribe of Benjamin, going to allow this to happen? So in verse 13 they said, now then, deliver up the men, the worthless fellows in Gibeah, that we may put them to death and remove this wickedness from Israel. So they were saying like, hey, they did a crappy thing. They did something really bad. Excuse my language, I'm sorry. They did something really bad. And so we want to punish them. You would think that Benjamin would look at this because the Levite man had basically written out a letter and had said multiple times, we skipped it in chapter 20 of the account. Once again, it was a very simplified version of it, of what happened in that city, what happened to him and his concubine. But in verse 13, the sons of Benjamin would not listen to the voice of their brothers, the sons of Israel. They did not listen. The people had come to Benjamin as one, united people, and said, look at what happened in this city that you're technically in charge of. We should punish them for what they did, because what they did was really, really bad. And Benjamin said, nope. Instead, we send troops to the city of Gibeah, and we're going to fight you. We're going to stand firm with our city, and you're not going to take us down. They did not listen to the diplomatic approach that they first attempted, and instead stood by the sinful city. So let's skip down a little to verse 18. Liam, you can go to the next slide. In verse 18, it says, "Now the sons of Israel arose, went up to Bethel, and inquired of God and said, 'Who shall go up first for us to battle against the sons of Benjamin?' And the Lord said, 'Judah shall go up first.'" So they had first considered what the Levite man said. They had taken counsel with one another, and then they had made a decision of what to do. Then, when the scene changed, when what they thought they were going to do was like by the law, they thought like this is what we should be doing, this is the right order, this is the proper thing to do. But now Benjamin, the entire tribe, is now wanting to fight us, and so they were like, well, we should talk to God first and see who should go first, what we should do. And the Lord answered. The Lord answered them and gave them a direction. He gave them a direction because they asked. Just a simple ask. And he said, yep, here you go. This is what you need to do. Now, in the next couple verses, we see that Israel rose and the people of Judah got up, went out. They took a certain number, and a lot of them fell to the hands of Benjamin. They did not do well. You would have thought, oh, God said to go and do it. They would win right away. But no, they lost, and they lost badly. It was a horrible, horrible loss for them. And so Judges 20:23, Liam, that's the next slide. The sons of Israel went up and wept before the Lord until evening, and inquired of the Lord, saying, "Shall we again draw near for battle against the sons of my brother Benjamin?" And the Lord said, "Go up against him." Remember what we said about the tribes, that they all came from Jacob and his sons, and that Benjamin was one of the sons, and so they are all technically related in some form. And they're like, well, this is technically our brother tribe. Are you sure about this? Like, should we really go up against them? They went up and wept before the Lord because they were so heartbroken about it. Should we really go up against our brother again? And the Lord said, go up against him. There are times where we reach something that we're going along with a plan that we have talked to God a lot about, and then suddenly we reach a point and we're like, ew, this hasn't gone the way I wanted it to go or the way that I thought it would go. And we sometimes just leave it. We just leave that thing over there. We don't touch it. In reality, in the moment, we need to say, okay, this is no longer according to our plan. Let's pray about it and see, is this what God still wants me to do? Should I still continue along this path in a different way, or with more effort and more power and gumps and yes, we can do it? And sometimes the answer is yes, sometimes it's no, but sometimes it's yes. Like in their case, it was, yep, do it again tomorrow. And tomorrow came, and they did it again, and they once again lost badly. Wouldn't that be confusing? It's like God has told us to battle our own tribe because of the sins of that city, and the tribe is rallying around that city saying, yes, we are totally okay with this city, don't punish it. And so we have to punish that city because God doesn't want people like that to go unpunished. And God is telling us to keep going. But they had 2 terrible, terrible days where they lost, and they lost by a lot. And for reference, they had a lot more people than the tribe of Benjamin. Benjamin was itty bitty. And it's the rest of the tribes all gathered together. There was a lot of them. If you look at the numbers, it tells you. It's like, oh, that many died again? Like, how is that possible? And so you would see where they were coming from. William, you can go on to the next slide. In 20 verse 26, it says, "Then all the sons of Israel and all the people went up and came to Bethel and wept. Thus they remained there before the Lord and fasted that day until evening. They offered burnt offerings, peace offerings before the Lord." So they saw they once again lost. And this was something they were already hesitant about, where like the first time they were like, yeah, let's get God's like approval basically. Let's get what he wants us to do. Uh-oh, we didn't succeed, so maybe he doesn't actually want us to do it. And he's like, nope, keep going it. They didn't succeed again, and so they went up and wept again. They fasted. They burnt offerings and peace offerings. Peace offerings are used to try to like say, hey, we want peace. Please bring us peace. And they fasted and they prayed. They were very diligent about what they were doing. So then when they drew near again to God, in verse 28, which Liam, you can click the slide to Judges 20:28. It says, "And Phinehas the son of Eleazar, Aaron's son," which that means he was a Levite, which means he was a priest at the time. So he was probably one of the ones that kind of oversaw the offering. He was the one talking at the time and reaching out to God, since that was kind of the role of the Levites, which if you were in Sunday school, we kind of talked about that. So Aaron's son stood before it in ministry in those days, saying, "Shall I yet again go out to battle against the sons of my brother Benjamin, or shall I cease?" So they gave like a second option of like, the first time they were like, shall we do this against our brother? And this time they're like, or shall we stop? Like, here's this other option. Last time we asked you, but you didn't take this option, so maybe if we say it out loud, you'll take this option. Sometimes we do that in our own prayers, like, I know this might be what you want me to do, but like, this option is good too. Look at how delicious and scrumptious and wonderful it is. Isn't it so appealing? But the Lord said to them, "Go up, for tomorrow I will deliver them into your hand." Everything wasn't happening how they wanted it to happen. Everything wasn't going to plan. And they kept asking God, do we really is this really, really what you want us to be doing? And he kept saying, go back, go do it again. You can do this, go up. And he finally promised them, tomorrow I will deliver them into your hands. If you continue reading on in 20, you see that for a minute, it doesn't seem like Benjamin is being delivered into their hands. They probably were starting to lose a little hope at that point. But then it turns around, and they finally have victory. The justice has been given. The people have been judged for their wrongdoings. In chapter 21, they had made a promise to God, basically to say, we won't associate with the tribe of Benjamin anymore in marital ways, so then they can't have any more lineage. But then they were like, well, God, do we really actually have to keep that promise? Because then our brother Benjamin's tribe is going to die out. We really like them. We didn't want to fight them. Are you really sure that we should let them just die out? So in chapter 21, they create this idea of basically how to let Benjamin sustain and allow Benjamin to continue to be provided for in a roundabout way that isn't as direct. I would recommend you going and reading in the parts that we didn't read, so then you can see the fullness of this passage on your own. But I'd like to talk to you of the 3 main points of why this passage. I kind of touched on it a little bit in my story that I told earlier, and I kind of touched on it, of like the highlighted things, of the things that really stand out. So Liam, can you go to the next slide? The first thing is, don't give up in your prayer life. They kept going back. They kept saying, are you sure? They kept going back and seeking and knocking and asking. In Matthew 7 through 8, it tells us to ask, tells us to seek, tells us to knock, tells us that everything will be given to us through that. But sometimes it doesn't happen the way that we want it to. Because number 2, God's timing is different than our timing, and his plan is different than ours. Where we might want something in the moment, but it's going to take time. It's going to change. And that's okay to be different timing. Throughout Scripture, we see timing very differently, and we see God's plan play out in different ways than we expect. And so remembering that, yes, we can use something like Judges 19 and 20 to say, oh yeah, God does come through, even if it's in a way that we don't think. And even it's in timing that we don't think, which is third point, God provides. In Revelation 21, 1 through 5, it talks about this new creation, this new earth, new heaven and a new earth, a kingdom on earth. A wonderful place that God is going to provide for his believers, for his faithful. Because even in our time when things seem a little messed up, the political scene isn't great right now, the economic scene isn't great right now, the national scene isn't great right now with different wars going on, different gangs trying to take control of countries. It's not great. But we must know that we can't give up on our prayers. God's timing is going to be different than our own no matter what. And he will provide an ultimate, wonderful kingdom where all of the bad in our world is completely gone. And all things will be made new for the greatness of him and for his glory. And we will be in that kingdom with him because he provides and he comes through. I'll pray as the band comes forward for our last song. Dear God, thank you for using passages like the one in Judges to allow us to see your goodness, your provision, and that you will answer prayers even in ways that we might not expect or we might not want. Allow us to see you and your movement in our times and in our lives. Allow us to listen and follow your guidance and your will. And allow us to continue to learn from passages that we might look at and first say, this isn't what we want, but I guess we can learn something from it. Thank you for your good words and your wonderful kingdom that will be to come. In your son's name, amen.
In a world that needs your light, in a world that needs your love, in a world whose only hope is from above, let us shine.